Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel, the best place on the internet for Pathfinder lore and history. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a vid. Also, if there's anything in particular that you'd like me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. I read all the comments and I love getting them. This week I'm doing an entirely new type of video series. I'm going to start it here and we'll see if people enjoy this. If you do enjoy it, let me know in the comments below. This new set of videos is going to be my faction series, where I start looking at individual factions within the world of Pathfinder. This is a type of video that's been requested a lot. The one that I get the most is Pathfinder Society. I'm not going to start with the Pathfinder Society. That's a big meaty one for me to get to later. What I'm going to start with is the Firebrands faction, which is a new faction that emerged as part of the lore changes that came out in 2nd edition. I'm going to talk about what they're all about so you can make use of Firebrands in your own game.
The origins of the Firebrands. The Firebrands are a newly emerged faction in the Pathfinder world, born from the fires of the revolution in Vidrian and solidified by alliances with other more entrenched pro-liberty factions spread throughout the Inner Sea. The momentous fire at a plantation on the outskirts of Eladar in 4715 led to a nationwide slave revolt and popular uprising. More details on the specifics of this revolution can be found in my Vidrian video, and to a lesser extent in my Isle of the Shackles deep dive video as well. The revolutionaries quickly overwhelmed the Sargavan colonialist government, but Baron Utilinus, the former Grand Custodian of Sargava, persisted in his attempts to govern by turning to his allies among the Free Captains as a last-ditch effort. In exchange for increased tribute from Sargava, the Free Captains agreed to serve as an enforcement arm, and were granted full authority to quell the revolution. While the sudden influx of pirates working on behalf of the barony dealt a notable blow to the revolution, the rebels quickly rallied and resumed their resistance. It was in the ensuing weeks that figures like Avarnius, Shimali Mannix, and many others rose to prominence. Former Free Captain Shimali Mannix collaborated with allies of hers in the Shackles to commandeer pirate ships and turn those cannons against their erstwhile owners. As this occurred, the canny politicking of rebel mastermind Avarnius led to an alliance with nearby Sengor, whose fleet overwhelmed the disorganized pirates. By the spring of 4716 the rebels had won, and the practice of slavery in western Garund came to a decisive end. The newly independent nation was named Vidrian, but it was but the first spark of a cleansing flame that would sweep through much of the Inner Sea. Avarnius and the other Vidric heroes were not content to sit on their laurels and focus only on defense. Brutal and corrupt regimes existed across the Inner Sea, and the cause of liberty was not one unique to the western Wangi region. Avarnius sent diplomats northwards to seek like-minded revolutionaries across the various places that Chelish imperialism had negatively impacted, and to other more remote regions as well. The first alliance and meeting of the minds occurred in the winter of 4716, towards the end of the same year that the Vidric Revolution was won. This meeting was held between the Vidrics and the Silver Ravens, a revolutionary faction that had emerged in northern Cheliax the prior year and resulted in the new nation of Ravenel being formed. To summarize those events briefly as well, Queen Abigail Thrune had appointed her cousin Barzillai Thrune as the Archduke of Ravenel because of reports of unrest in the region. Unrest which she could not address directly herself because she was dealing with an even more widespread problem in the south, when an organization called the Glorious Reclamation seized control of the critical city of Westcrown. In Ravenel, Barzillai took harsh measures to suppress rebellion, including eliminating local figures and imposing oppressive laws through proclamations. His actions only served to galvanize revolutionary sentiment. The Silver Ravens, a clandestine group whose origins dated back to the Civil War, emerged in the city of Kintargo and rapidly grew into a resistance force consisting of rebel groups across the duchy. Their leaders spearheaded the resistance against Barzillai and rallied the people to stand against his rule. The climax of the Kintargan rebellion occurred when major members of the Silver Ravens, including a celebrated performer from the city's renowned opera house named Shensen, confronted and defeated Barzillai, liberating the city. The rest of the duchy followed. The Silver Ravens also destroyed Menador Keep and blocked the mountain pass at the Menador Gap, cutting off the only safe land route between the Duchy of Ravenel and Greater Cheliax. Finally, they found an appropriate legal means of declaring themselves independent of the rest of Cheliax, using provisos established in the Cheliax Covenant, the founding documents written after House Thrune won the Chelish Civil War. Thanks to these measures, the legalistic Asmodeans of Cheliax have so far accepted the terms of Ravenelian independence. Back to the subject of the First Alliance, the initial diplomatic interactions between Ravenel and Vidrian paved the way for the exchange of their respective tales of revolution. What began as a friendly conversation meant to share their experiences soon evolved into a realization that both nations shared deeply rooted ideologies on the inherent right to liberty. Shumali Mannix, now Vidrian's admiral, and the Sapphire Butterfly, a masked vigilante and founding member of the New Silver Ravens, proposed the idea of extending their efforts to support local revolutions all across the Inner Sea region. They named their alliance the Firebrands, symbolizing the Union's nature as igniters of revolutionary fires. Using the term Firebrands in discussion about rebels and revolutions also intentionally blurred the lines between passionate freedom fighters and the organization itself. In addition to the Vidric Revolutionaries and the Silver Ravens, another group to quickly join the Firebrands alliance was the Bellflower Network. In fact, another founding member of the Silver Ravens, Laria Longroads, was a former leader in the Bellflower Network herself. The network had been operating in Cheliax for a long time, helping halfling slaves escape the country. More groups would eventually join in over time, meaning that the Firebrands was not so much a single faction as they represented a coalition of independent revolutionary factions, all united by a universal ethos of liberty and willingness to fight for their ideals. The Firebrands initiated their first mission with small-scale efforts, providing assistance and knowledge to local groups, such as worker unions in Andoran, enslaved individuals in Cheliax, and various minor uprisings across the Inner Sea. Their initial endeavors deliberately maintained a modest scope to test the waters of their new venture and minimize potential repercussions if the group's connection to Ravenel and Vidrian was discovered. News of the Firebrands began to spread, and the mere existence of a group dedicated to aiding new revolutions inspired others to take their own step forwards towards change. Starting in 4717, the Firebrands started to see some very significant successes. In that year, Absalom came under siege by demonic forces. Two figures masterminded this assault. The first was Kothval, a Glabrizu demon who had entered the material universe millennia ago. The second was the corrupted dwarf summoner Thurl, one of the many dwarves descended from the exiles of Yor Murdun, who settled in Sarkoris or Mendev after the Sky Citadel's fall. Notably, Thurl was a cousin to Staunton Vane, the dwarf lover of the demon Minago from the Wrath of the Righteous adventure path and computer role-playing game. Kothval and Thurl recruited minotaurs from a Baphomet-worshipping tribe on the Isle of Kortos, and then supplemented that army with demonic hordes drawn from Baphomet's realm known as the Ivory Labyrinth, and from Kothval's other abyssal allies. The assault on the city at the center of the world came out of nowhere, and for a while it seemed like Warlord Thurl might succeed where the likes of the Archmage Nex had failed. The Firebrands intervened, however, on condition of the repeal of the flesh taxes law of 4635. A little more context here. Starting in 4635, the Grand Council of Absalom, much to the surprise of the city's progressive and even centrist constituents, passed the law of the flesh taxes. This allowed for criminals and those with excessive debts to serve labor sentences in domestic and agrarian service, a more restrictive form of institutionalized slavery, but slavery nonetheless. This ended almost 2,000 years of otherwise abolitionist policy in the city. Acting Siege Lord Winsol Starborn, listening to counsel from the Firebrands, offered unconditional freedom to any slave within Absalom who helped defend the city. Later, after the siege was won, Starborn was promoted to the position of Primarch of the Grand Council of Absalom, and he took further steps in this regard, outlawing all slavery within the city-state and throughout the Isle of Kortos. This marked the first major success of the Firebrands. More would follow. Just to enumerate a few, in 4719 the Fire's Finest organization emerged in Numeria, a Firebrand subfaction established by an android named Passenger, whose own people had a complicated relationship with subjugation at the hands of the Technic League, which had only collapsed 3 years prior. Passenger and the Fire's Finest would become among the most recognizable of the Firebrand subfaction, traveling across Avistan on a repurposed annihilator named the Scrap Heap, doing good works in the cause of liberty wherever they traveled. In 4721, the Firebrands held their 5th Vaunters Carnival, an annual celebration of liberty and freedom, in Sothis to celebrate the end of the institutionalized slavery still in place in Osirian, which was closely followed in 4722, with a shift in policy in neighboring Katapesh as well. Along with the successes, there have also been setbacks. The Bladebreakers, a rebel group in Galt, aimed to end the nation's turmoil by capturing the Grey Gardeners, the enforcers of the Revolutionary Council. However, the Bladebreakers were overpowered by the Grey Gardeners and captured themselves. The Firebrands rushed to Galt to rescue the imprisoned Bladebreakers, successfully saving them from a grim end met at the pointy end of the dreaded final blades. However, despite rescuing the Bladebreakers, that organization dissolved, unable to maintain the momentum needed to keep up the fight. Some other events have met with mixed emotions as well. Most significantly and most recently in 4722, Queen Abigail Thrune issued a major edict. They too would follow suit with the other major nations along the Inner Sea and end institutionalized slavery, but theirs would be a lengthy process. The Firebrand assessment is that this basically is a publicity stunt. While the dust is settling from this announcement, intel collected by the Firebrand's best agents shows that slavery has not really gone away. The Chelish, it seemed, are adopting a system more similar to the mechanisms favored in Malthun, transitioning to indentured servitude for former slaves, now commonly called debt laborers, who can earn their freedom through sufficient labor. The move from open legalized slavery towards these exploitative debt contracts has served to placate their global trade partners while allowing Cheliacs to continue the worst of their practices without considerable political reprisal. The Firebrands are not fooled, and they know there is much work to be done to still liberate Cheliacs. This more or less brings us to today. A meta-discussion of the lore changes between editions. Before we get into the individual sub-factions of the Firebrands, I thought I'd take a minute here and address some of the metatextual elements of the lore changes between 1st and 2nd edition, as the Firebrands in particular are instrumental to that shift. In the 1st edition of the lore, slavery was commonplace, more or less throughout the Inner Sea region. As part of the rollout of 2nd edition, Paizo has decided that going forward slavery would be a less prominent part of the setting. I'm personally grateful that rather than retcon the existing lore, Paizo decided that a better approach would instead be to evolve the world and advance the setting. 1st edition ran over 10 years, plenty of time for significant shifts in the zeitgeist of the world to occur, and one of those is that influential factions like the Firebrands have brought a more contemporary attitude towards the subjugation of people to the various nations of the Inner Sea. I know that some people will hear this shift and worry that the setting has been defanged, so to speak, or that some of the darker edges are getting worn away. A lot of Lost Omens content, however, assures me that this is not the case. Consider the warnings on page 6 and 7 of the Lost Omens Impossible Lands Guide. Geb, it notes, is infamous for raising humans and other sapient beings as cattle for food. Here, slavery continues to be practiced openly. Although there's no Lost Omens supplement for Nidal yet, I also imagine that's another country that continues to practice various forms of torturous indoctrination, oppression, and so on. Which is to say that slavery and other forms of humanoid subjugation will continue to exist throughout the Inner Sea region and beyond. However, in the broad strokes, the default toggle, as it regards slavery, has been switched from on to off. And I want to emphasize that it's just the default, and you can make your own setting. For me personally, I'm really excited about the changes in Vidrian, and can't wait to revisit that part of the world as more adventures come out for 2E. I'm especially keen to bring back players who were with me in my 1st edition Serpent Skull adventure path after so many years so they can see how the world has changed. That's the fun of the living world. Anyway, let's get into the Firebrand cells. Although this video is a faction guide, the Firebrands are in fact a loose coalition of differing allied cells, and each of them has their own unique identity, symbols, and goals. Most of the Firebrand cells are connected to a specific place or region, and have goals related to the struggles of that particular place or region. The unifying feature, however, is that Firebrands are revolutionaries in nature, and view freedom and liberty as central tenets to their respective groups' creeds. Let's start with the two factions that started it all, the Saltbreakers and the Silver Ravens. In Vidrian, the Western Wangi region, and beyond, operate the Saltbreakers. According to the modest account of Shimali Mannix herself, the founding of the Firebrands over a beer shared with a friend bore a striking resemblance to the casual ease with which she reportedly achieved many of her other varied accomplishments. Though Shimali may wear the title of the first Firebrand with a hint of reluctance, she remains profoundly proud of all that the group has achieved. Following her pivotal alliance with the Silver Ravens of Ravenel, Shimali's fleet came to be known as the Saltbreakers, as it evolved into a maritime cell of the Firebrands faction. Captains of Saltbreaker vessels are free to pursue noble causes wherever their course takes them, with only one stipulation: they must keep fleet leader Shimali and her trusted Captain Circle regularly informed of their operations. While the Captain Circle does prefer to grant autonomy and tends to refrain from too much direct interference, they do occasionally summon a vessel back to Vidric waters for an audit if it appears to be operating counter to Saltbreaker interests. A ship that disregards his summons is considered lost, and word goes out that it's fair game for any fleet member to apprehend. Most ships return to Anthusis, Vidrian's capital, at least biannually for shore leave. This period allows them to provide detailed reports on their activities, undertake repairs, recruit new crew members, and engage in trade. Despite the fact that half of their fleet is typically at sea, the Saltbreakers also serve as Vidrian's naval defense, prepared to repel any sudden advances by the Chelish Navy, the Free Captains, or anyone else with eyes on Vidrian's harbors. To discourage foreign threats, the Captain's Circle goes to great lengths to obfuscate the actual number of ships safeguarding Desperation Bay at any given time. Saltbreaker vessels frequently enter and exit ports under the cover of darkness, or employ illusions to conceal their true movements. This covert approach has led locals to affectionately referring to them as spirit ships. Some significant members of the Saltbreakers include Zaz, a spirited Iruxi pirate who maintains impeccable attire, reminiscent of his revolutionary days when he pilfered more ships from Sargavan authorities than any other Saltbreaker. Now semi-retired, he runs the Gaudy Otter, a tavern built out of a grounded wreck in Desperation Bay. By day, this hub accommodates local traders, while by night it transforms into a lively dance hall, hosting legendary parties. Beyond revelry, Zaz uses these gatherings as opportunities to impart his knowledge of infiltration and theft to prospective Saltbreakers. Another is Ajeri, a kind-hearted librarian who was once a fisherwoman but is now a dedicated scholar. She actively searches for patterns and readily joins crews she believes can further her quest to refine her theories about achieving lasting change. Although she possesses a love for gossip and often poses uncomfortably probing questions, her knack for identifying locations where vanquished oppressors are regaining influence makes her a welcomed guest on any Saltbreaker vessel. Finally, there is Yana Mashaline, a spirited elf arcanist who embraced the Saltbreakers while undertaking the Kalajay journey of self-discovery known as the Crucible of the Heart. A blend of magic and intuition enables Yana to predict impending weather events, detect unusual ship movements, and pinpoint troubled shores. Concerned about finding someone to inherit her skills, Yana has spent her recent years brewing magic potions that replicate many of her abilities. These enchanted bottles help ships navigate, track weather changes, and provide distressed communications with a means to summon Saltbreaker assistance. Headquartered in Ravenel and Kintargo are the Silver Ravens. On that fateful day when agents of House Thrune callously took her mother's life, Shensen was but a young girl, forced to hide in the trees from her assailants. This traumatic event ignited an enduring, seething hatred for Cheliax's diabolical rulers, a hatred that has burned within her ever since. It was a moment that compelled her never to cower in fear again. Her subsequent imprisonment at the hands of Barzillai Thrune years later only served to deepen her animosity and fortify her resolve. Upon her liberation, she stepped up to assume a leadership role among the Silver Ravens, guiding them in their efforts to foment rebellion, liberate Kintargo, and establish the new nation of Ravenel. Shensen's leadership style centers on inspiration and vision, leaving the intricacies of logistics to others. She places a premium on self-determination, refusing to establish anything resembling a chain of command or issuing direct orders. Instead, her focus lies in supporting rebellions near and far, and then celebrating those acts. She maintains regular meetings with allies from various organizations, both local and foreign, as well as fellow Firebrand leaders such as Rannick Helt and Devrin Arlos to coordinate their collective efforts. However, she doesn't just lead from the rear. If she received word of Silver Ravens in captivity at the hands of Hell Knights, she would waste no time in assembling a small team to mount a rescue mission herself. Shensen has elevated Kintargo into a bastion of freedom and the arts, enhancing the Silver Raven's status to a point where Firebrands from across the Inner Sea come to seek their guidance and assistance. Many individuals make the pilgrimage to Kintargo, while even more request the presence of Silver Ravens at their locations. Shensen endeavors to accommodate every appeal, from the Dream Tenders in Nidal to the Bright Lions of Mazali, yet her unwavering focus remains on the immediate threat posed by House Thrune's control over Cheliax, and she refuses to rest until this oppressive rule is overturned. Other prominent Silver Ravens include Laria Longroads, a spirited halfling revolutionary who manages Kintargo's renowned Longroads Coffee House. Her fame and the coffee house's success hardly divert her attention from her true mission with the Silver Ravens. Her boundless energy and vivacious personality continue to attract and motivate Silver Ravens and admirers throughout the city and beyond. Rexus Victicora, a gifted human enchanter serving as one of the founding members of the Silver Ravens, he employs his exceptional oratory skills and magical prowess to recruit and train new members. Preferring to remain in Kintargo, Rexus channels his unwavering patriotism for Ravenel into political positions that advance the new state's welfare and support rebellious causes across the region. He is a prolific writer, having authored numerous treatises and essays on the nature of liberty in the hopes of inspiring individuals beyond Ravenel's borders to rise against oppression. Futhark the Anvil is an orc strategist who brings a unique perspective to the cause as a former Hell Knight. Their time within the Hell Knights helped them grasp the inner workings of oppression's machinery. Futhark's keen intellect aids in solving problems ranging from resource procurement to orchestrating rescues. They also carry the weight of their former state-sanctioned crimes, which fuels their intensity during stage performances in which they often portray the role of an antagonist. Lusuru Gadwing. A well-traveled and eclectically educated Tengu playwright, specializes in creating theatrical and operatic works designed to inspire rebellion while eluding government censors and challenging societal complacency. Lusuro's exuberance often overwhelms new recruits with biographical inquiries as she seeks to mine personal experiences for dramatic content. It's not just her work as a playwright that makes her valuable to the Silver Ravens, but also her work as a master forger. Finally, there is Vivienne Ashurka, a tiefling vigilante who first adopted her vigilante persona of the Sapphire Butterfly with the dream of freeing her idol Shensen and liberating Ravenel from House Thrune's grasp. Vivienne devoted her life to this goal, fighting for her dream even after victory was already achieved. While many of her fellow Silver Ravens turned to the practicalities of governance, Vivienne grew restless. The routine of committee meetings left little room for her to fight for freedom, the fomenting of rebellion, and the dramatic displays of her vigilante persona. Particularly irksome to Vivienne was the call to forgive past supporters of diabolical Cheliacs and find ways to integrate them into the new state. To her, the struggle had always been deeply personal, beginning with the mission to locate and free Shensen. It was far from over in her eyes. Vivienne found solace in the successful rebellion in Sargava and the establishment of the Free State of Vidrian. She was one of the first to welcome Shimali Mannix, forging a fast friendship. Recognizing in each other the revolutionary fervor capable of igniting change across Galarian, the Sapphire Butterfly and Shimali swore an oath of mutual aid between the Silver Ravens and the Saltbreakers. This pact ultimately led to the creation of the Firebrands. Vivienne abandoned any notion of returning to her old life and wholeheartedly channeled her energy into the Firebrands. In addition to these two founding and most influential Firebrand cells, there are various other member cells that operate throughout the Inner Sea region. Let's take a look at some of the more prominent ones, starting in the north and moving south across the Inner Sea as we go. The Linorm Kingdoms. Rothar's Reavers. Although the age of the Vikingur formally ended millennia ago, some Ulfin captains, especially from Broken Bay, continue to reave the southern shorelines in the ways of the Vikings of old. One of these notable captains, still practicing this ancient tradition, is Rothar Seawiles, who had made a name for himself as a raider who plundered the shores of Ravenel for years. However, his piratical activities against Ravenel came to an end following the nation's declaration of independence in 4716. Now Rothar focuses his raids on Hellmouth Gulf and ventures as far south as the Chelish city of Corentin. Most believe that Rothar made a deal with the Firebrands to continue reaving, but to focus his attacks on those nations like Nadal and Cheliax, who continue to oppress their citizens. Those seeking to claim the bounty on Rothar can expect a reward of 250 gold pieces, which doubles if the claimant can provide evidence of his collaborations with the Silver Ravens or other factions of Firebrands. Irison, the Heralds of Summer's Return. The Heralds are an underground anti-government movement of idealists and freedom fighters that predate the new Firebrands faction. Their ultimate goal has always been to overthrow the Witch Queens and to break the spell that holds Irison in eternal winter. A fair number of druids also belong to this group, motivated to return ecological balance to the nation. After the witch conquest of Irison in 3313, the Ulfin people became slaves to the witches of the realm. Since the crowning of Anastasia in 4713, the practice of Ulfin slavery has technically ended, but Ulfin continue to be subjugated second-class citizens, and the heralds continue to work to end the oppressive class system of Irison. Although they don't have a formal leader, some significant members include Anichka Labakova, mayor of the town of Karad, Solveig Ardal, a priestess of Melanian Whitethrone, and Vilma Lochnik, a wealthy widow and owner of a half-dozen warehouses in the busy town of Lod. Mendev and the Sarkoris Scar, the Aurora's Light. While the world wound is slowly healing, demons still terrorize Mendev and the Sarkoris Scar. Even worse, the scars of the Third Crusade have not yet fully healed, and despite Chancellor Irahai's struggle to control these unruly zealots, paranoid witch hunts continue to target innocent victims. In response, a group of determined firebrands known as the Aurora's Light operates in the region, staunchly opposing those who misuse their authority and oppress rather than uplift. The group also boasts several skilled exorcists adept at identifying and thwarting demonic possession. Within the Aurora's Light there exists a tension between its leader, the gnome cleric Harmit Goldripple, who wishes to publicize their actions to inspire hope, and the half-orc master exorcist Ganthal, who advocates subtlety to avoid attracting more demonic attention. Most members of Aurora's Light, including the two leaders, are followers of Pulura, the imperial lord of the Cold North and the Aurora. For this cell in particular, the lines between their faith and their mission as liberators blur, as they view their faith as integral to their work. Numeria and Northeast Avistan, the Circuit Breakers, the Techno Drifters, and the Fire's Finest. The lands of Numeria crawl with technological terrors, but with the recent ascendance of Cassandali and the scattering of the Technic League, the changing country has increasingly attracted curious firebrands. The Circuit Breakers, for example, are a party of firebrand adventurers who approached Kevoth Kul in the Palace of Fallen Stars with a proposal. They offer to track down the remaining members of the Technic League in exchange for access to rare sky metals. Initially hesitant to trust independent contractors, Kevoth Kul had no choice but to acknowledge that some remnants of the sinister league that once controlled Numeria still eluded his loyal guards. He also sensed a shared desire for revenge in Ril Faltir, the android leader of the Circuit Breakers. Recognizing this, the Black Sovereign agreed to their offer, providing them with valuable equipment from his treasury and dispatching them to eliminate the remnants of the Technic League. Meanwhile, in other parts of Numeria, the Techno Drifters roam from settlement to settlement, assisting ordinary citizens with their troubles and defending against the various dangers in this treacherous land. They arrive in towns on peculiar mechanical mounts crafted from the remnants of fallen starships, serving as impartial mediators to resolve conflicts peacefully when possible, and employing their aged lasers and flamethrowers to handle more challenging threats. Raylon Quick, the leader of the Techno Drifters, issued a call for bold heroes to join their ranks on this journey, focusing on tackling some of Numeria's most formidable adversaries, such as Annihilator robots and mutants tainted by Numerian fluids. The most famous firebrand cell to emerge from Numeria by far, however, must be the Fire's Finest. They don't work exclusively in Numeria, however, rather they can be found all across the Northeast Avistan region, and they make quite the entrance. When they roll into town, it's probably not the cheers, singing, and dancing that accompany their arrival that one can't help but notice, so much as it is the colossal mechanical scorpion they call home, clanking its way closer to the settlement. The Fire's Finest epitomize the daredevil spirit that the Inner Sea region has come to associate with the Firebrands. They roam across the nations of Eastern Avistan at their leisure, selecting their stops based on their whims and the promise of fun and excitement. Members of this faction are natural thrill-seekers, constantly on the lookout for tall buildings to scale, ancient ruins to explore, or even just a bit of mischief for the sheer thrill of it. While they often find themselves in confrontations with local oppressors, these skirmishes are usually a byproduct of their quest for excitement rather than a deliberate act of altruism. Their mobile base of operations is a refurbished Annihilator robot called the Scrap Heap. At the helm of this daring ensemble is Passenger, an android whose lust for life is legendary. Passenger is a jovial and inquisitive individual, always eager to learn more about the people they encounter during their travels. They have an unwavering interest in local hangouts, cuisines, cultures, and of course potential explorations, regardless of the inherent dangers. Tien Ra, a fearless Fanglord beastkin, serves as Passenger's second-in-command. He's a bold adventurer in his own right, with exceptional skills in crafting both magical and technological items. While Passenger does a lot of work maintaining the scrap heap, they collaborate closely with Gerald Goldenheart, a savvy dwarf mechanic renowned for their mastery of the technological marvels that keep the robot running. Gerald's origins trace back to Dongan Hold, where exposure to firearms and other technological innovations provided them with a distinct advantage in tending to Scrap Heap's intricate systems. Another noteworthy member of the Fire's Finest is Asilla, a half-elf clothier originally hailing from Kadira. While all firebrands have a love of fashion, given the importance of self-expression and personal image to the faction, the Fire's Finest excel in this realm. This reputation is largely thanks to the remarkable talent of Asilla, who is celebrated for her exceptional skills in crafting exquisite attire. Razmiran and the River Kingdoms, the Able Jinxers and other independent firebrand operatives. A large riverboat named the Second Chance at Freedom traverses the Selin River, crewed by members of a firebrand cell known as the Able Jinxers. Founded by a Tengu pirate named Kaukisk, who was once forcibly conscripted into service by a Chelish warship before being rescued and liberated by firebrands, her crew takes their name from the common superstition that Tengus can bring good luck and thwart curses when aboard a ship. Only some of Kaukisk's crew are fellow Tengus, but the non-Tengu crew will often wear raven masks when conducting missions. Common operations conducted by the Able Jinxers include the liberation of prisoners from Razmiran faith barges, the fighting of oppressive despots across the river kingdoms, and the aid of refugees escaping from Galt. The faction symbol is a Tengu face beneath crossed cutlasses. In addition to the Able Jinxers, several independent firebrands call the river kingdoms their home as well. Recent political turmoil in Numeria has weakened the position of the notorious Black Marquis, terror of the riverways, and a firebrand pirate named Utar Fairhand has begun openly rallying ships to the cause of overthrowing him. Current gladiatorial darlings of the arena in Timon, Jeski Ironhand and Hantiz the Cutter, have also announced they are members of the Firebrands faction. Concerning rumors of an invasion from the neighboring expansionist theocracy of Resmiran have prompted the two of them to put out the call for firebrand assistance in Timon as well. Ustalav, the liberators of Versex. Even in the grim and dour realm of Ustalav, cells of the firebrands can be found now. Rosdin Brighand, a Dampier abjurer and former smuggler, leads a notable group. Operating covertly from his hometown of Rosenport, Rosdin specializes in freeing innocent individuals from vampiric domination. His operations in Versex have led to various encounters that have extended his work to include the opposition of other supernatural threats within Ustalav. One recent example was the Ustalavi aristocrat and mad scientist Gallifreil, who imprisoned numerous scientists within a remote castle and coerced them into creating increasingly dangerous and bizarre inventions for her. The Gravelands and the Hold of Belkzen. The Gallant Doom, the Thunder Peak, and others. The Gallant Doom is a militant squad of disciples of the halfling goddess Chaldira, who has overcome astounding odds to clear out old forts of undead residents and rescue holdout villages from ravening ghouls. The group takes chances that most veterans in the Gravelands find foolhardy, but their halfling leader Deltira Panver merely smiles and tells naysayers fortune favors the living. Firebrands in the area, including the Gallant Doom and other independent figures, often band together with other regional factions that fight the undead, such as the Knights of Lastwall or the Nirmathi rebels. Another such group call themselves the Thunder Peak. From the slopes of Belkzen, this troop of orc firebrands ride giant dire-boar mounts into the northern fields of the Gravelands and the western reaches of Ustalav. Bystanders report that the warriors laugh as they trample scores of undead and cut down the sinister forces of the Whispering Tyrant. Members of the Thunder Peak embellish the flanks of their boar mounts with paintings depicting vanquished foes, and when they return to their home base city of Urgir, crowds form to see the magnificent beasts and hear the thrilling tales of their riders. Varissia and New Thassalon, Fate's Favored, the Epoch Hunters, and the Perfumed. In Varissia, the extensive firebrand group known as Fate's Favored comprises dozens of members, each adopting an alter ego by selecting a card from the Varissian fortune-telling deck called the Harrow. Most members do not keep their identities entirely concealed, but the group's leader, a stout one-eyed dwarf known as the Publican, prefers to operate discreetly. The Publican coordinates the efforts of the other firebrands across Varissia, facilitating daring heists and rescue missions throughout the Saga lands. The group's emblem, a crossed hammer and key over a battered crown, combines firebrand symbolism with the traditional harrow symbols, signifying both strength and agility. Members of Fate's Favored often leave behind the calling card in the form of their chosen harrow symbol. The Epoch Hunters, led by Tennyson Vaught, is another group of firebrands in the area. They have united to combat the threats that emerged when Zinadaceril returned to the present, including sin-spawn, time elementals, and rune-bound creatures, in their efforts to create a safer environment for the local populace. The Perfumed is a secretive organization operating within Zinadaceril's underworld. Comprised of diplomats, entertainers, and merchants, they are dedicated to opposing Rune Lord Bellimaris's tyrannical rule. Led by Hestric Grimgleam, they coordinate subversive activities, using coded sense to convey messages discreetly, even in closely monitored social gatherings. It is further believed that Queen Sorshan of Eurythnia has maintained covert communications with Hesteric and his group. Nidal, the Desnan Dreamtenders. The Dreamtenders are another organization, like the Heralds of Summer's Return, that predate the rest of the firebrands. This secret cult of Desna is headquartered at a ranch called the Plains of Night. Etrixia the Star-Touched had long been the leader of the Dreamtenders, and due to her celestial heritage, Etrixia had been persecuted by the Umbral Court since childhood. Their tortures, meant to kill her slowly and painfully, inspired her work with the Dreamtenders. She provided safe harbor for any who needed help in her oppressive home country. More information on the Dreamtenders and their allies can also be found in my Nidal deep dive video. One recent detail not covered in that video was that Etrixia Star-Touched is now the former leader of this faction, as she was arrested and eviscerated by Adamant Company trackers in 4721. Etrixia's second-in-command, Anazalin, quickly assumed leadership of the Dreamtenders. She coordinates closely with the Silver Ravens of nearby Ravenel, and with a cell of the Bellflower network called the Undervale, whose headquarters are in the Emerald Basin in eastern Nidal. They are led by a brave halfling named Landry Tetherteen, also discussed in my Nidal video. Ravenel, Vire Island, the Underfathoms. The Silver Ravens are not the only Firebrand cell in Ravenel. In Vyre, a city steeped in deception and treachery, the Fathoms Deep Firebrand cell met a violent end at the hands of the city's powerful ruling cult of Nergorber. However, hope was not entirely extinguished, as a few Firebrands managed to elude the purge. Among them, Wenteen Hordy, a resourceful halfling, emerged as the highest-ranking survivor. He cautiously began reaching out to determine if any other members of Fathoms Deep had survived and were willing to reunite. Wenteen formed an alliance with the Understreet Gang, a band of petty criminals operating in Vyre's extensive sewers. There, Wenteen subtly coaxed the gang's leader, Blind Eye Mavi, to form a new Firebrand cell, known as the Underfathoms. They operate under the guise of the Understreets, leveraging their less-than-stellar reputation as a cover for their Firebrand activities. Cheliax, the Bellflower Network, Kedley's Many Hands, Grandmother Callie, the Midnight Flock, and many, many others. The Bellflower Network is a secret society dedicated to freeing halfling slaves from Cheliax. Despite Queen Thrune's proclamation, halflings continue to suffer in Cheliax as second-class citizens and are forced into various forms of indentured servitude. The network is well established and predates the rest of the Firebrands faction by some time, and it does not consider itself a cell of the Firebrands faction, but rather as a distinct organization with allied goals. It maintains its own coded language and uses a blue bellflower as its symbol. The Bellflower Network is led by a mysterious figure known as the Farmer. In truth, only the very highest echelons of the network know whether the Farmer is an individual halfling or whether it is network code for many members. Those who know the truth are aware leadership is shared by two figures that coordinate the activities of the network, a brother and sister duo named Martim and Magdalena Fallows. Born to a fugitive slave who died giving birth to them, Magdalena and Martim were adopted into the Bellflower Network and grew up inside it. Their influence and popularity attracted the attention of the previous farmer, who helped groom them for the role. Magdalena is craftier and more tactically minded than her brother, and often pursues secret important tasks, while Martim serves as the public face of the farmer. The farmer works closely with Rannick Helt, a portly halfling bard with a full beard and a gentle laugh. Rannick, like so many of his fellows, was a former slave who found his life's calling as a bellflower tiller. Today he serves as the chief intermediary between the Bellflower Network and the rest of the Firebrands. Most of the Bellflower Network's collaboration with the Firebrands faction is now coordinated through Rannick, and he is well regarded across all Firebrand cells. Another ally to the Bellflower Network in Cheliax comes in the form of Lady Kedley of Westcrown. Kedley was a Chelish aristocrat who experienced a profound transformation one summer, disappearing into the depths of her sprawling manor's basement and emerging several months later with several grasping hands sprouting from her torso. Her former haughty demeanor and disdain for the marginalized had been replaced by a newfound sense of responsibility for those society rejected. She began liquidating her family's fortune to aid other flesh warps across the Inner Sea. In this period, Lady Kedley also learned her handmaiden, Niwin, had long been a secret Bellflower Network agent. Niwin and Lady Kedley now work together, assisting in financing Firebrand operations aimed at liberating those suffering from oppression or discrimination in Cheliax and nearby nations. They affectionately refer to the various other Firebrand cells who rely on her financial support as Kedley's Many Hands. Another ally of the Firebrands in Cheliax is a silver dragon named Kaltha Zitikin, who fled to an island near Thuvia's northern coast when House Thrune won the Chelish Civil War. She remained on the island for decades, nursing her flame-scarred wings and wounded pride, until a group of Bellflower Network agents arrived with a dozen liberated halflings from Ostenso. They convinced Kaltha Zitikin, whom they affectionately referred to as Callie, that the resistance against House Thrune still persisted and required her support. Callie left her island for the first time in nearly a century, assisting the halflings in finding new homes and spreading the word that Firebrands seeking shelter were welcome to stay on her transformed island, now known as Oasis Island. Today she frequently leaves her haven to join Firebrand allies on daring missions, but she remains sensitive about her scarred wings, which only permit her brief flights, and so she often assumes the guise of a grey-eyed halfling grandmother when traveling. The Midnight Flock is another rebel organization found in the gnome community of Brasselwark in eastern Cheliax. Led by the mysterious figure who goes by the nickname of the Crow, many know that revolutionary actions are only a part of their business, and that the Crow can fetch nearly any item on the black market for the right price to the right buyer. Few know that Zarzu Greenspun, a benign gnome shopkeeper, is secretly the Crow, however. Cheliax is offering a 1,500 gold piece bounty for the head of the Crow should anyone discover his true identity. Another group known to operate in Cheliax and possibly headquartered in neighboring Isger are the Intrepid Bombardiers, who stand out as a group of madcap alchemists and daring grenadiers who specialize in explosive missions. When other firebrands require something to be dramatically blown up, whether it's a bridge, the gate of an enemy fortress, or a malevolent warlord, they turn to the Intrepid Bombardiers. These adventurers thrive on challenging assignments that necessitate infiltrating enemy territory or infiltrating despotic cities like Egorian, although it is rumored their skill in stealth surpasses their talent in disguise. The Intrepid Bombardiers have a high turnover rate, with their leader Rumblepot Julkash constantly recruiting new members, particularly alchemists. Another potential firebrand-associated group is led by Menemin Vox, a centaur and the sister of the notorious Hell Knight of the Order of the Nail, Madrin Vox. She leads the Swift Hooves, the largest group of centaurs in the Egabarius plain of southern Cheliax. The Swift Hooves have long aided victims of bandit attacks, but they've recently begun attacking Chelish military bands, so Queen Abigail has put a substantive bounty on her head as well. Finally, in the town of Halmiris, the Chelish Lord Mayor Infaria Weltrax, discussed in my Cheliax deep dive video, has been assassinated, and an independent half-orc firebrand named Kronthus is suspected of doing the deed. A hefty bounty of 5,000 gold pieces is out for Kronthus's head as a result. Beyond these examples, Infernal Cheliax continues to house numerous other official and unofficial members and allies of the Firebrands faction. South-Central Avistan, including Isger, Malthun, Nirmathus, and Druma. The Stakebreakers, the Goblin Blood Firebrands, and Silver Spice Zappo. A loosely connected group of firebrands, operating as roustabouts and performers within traveling carnivals and circuses, can be found across the nations of south-central Avistan. The Stakebreakers derive their name from the term used to describe the ankle-height cuts on tent stakes that have been pounded flat, a constant reminder that those who've been pushed down can always rise up. As traveling carnivals often intersect, mingling work crews become a norm, allowing firebrands among circus staff to exchange information and prepare teams for future missions. The Stakebreakers excel in missions requiring incredible strength, acrobatic agility, and the covert transportation of liberated prisoners. Circuses provide ample hiding places for stowaways amidst the canvases and carts as they move from town to town. Many carnival owners remain unaware that some of their employees hold dual allegiances. Yellick Broadcoat, a charismatic showman, leads the group. He operates Broadcoat's Big Top, a circus renowned for its acrobatics, which not only captivates audiences but also trains new firebrands in athleticism and showmanship. In addition to the Stakebreakers, which represent the largest cell in the region, in Isger the most surprising homegrown firebrands are among the nation's large goblin population. Many Isgari goblins recognize that their brutal defeat during the Goblin Blood Wars was due to violent and cruel hobgoblin masters, which has made the creed of the firebrands particularly enticing to them. In addition to possibly being the headquarters of the aforementioned Intrepid Bombardier cell, Isger houses various other independent goblin firebrands with a similar ethos, such as the famous Nashi Goblin Blood, who single-handedly dispatched 3 separate necromancer cults with their brazen lure them into the open and firebomb them tactic. Hailing from further north and having grown up in the blighted and ruined Fangwood of Nirmathus, which had been ruled by a corrupted dryad for centuries, is another independent firebrand of renown, the sprite Silver Spice Zappo. In the year 4648, when the flames of war ignited in the form of the Nirmathi rebellion, she crossed paths with a resolute band of revolutionaries locked in fierce combat against Malthuni forces. More details on the Fangwood and the Nirmathi rebellion can be found in my Nirmathus and Malthun deep dive video. It was there that Zappo found her calling as an agent of freedom. The Nirmathan revolutionaries who had become her comrades introduced Zappo to Milani, the goddess of revolutions. Venturing beyond the Fangwood, she encountered more of Milani's devoted warriors. Over decades of unwavering support for the Everbloom's church, the sprite earnestly began offering prayers to this goddess of change. Through the bonds she forged among Milani's faithful, Zappo constructed a network of revolutionaries spanning the Inner Sea. This network led her to the Bellflower Network, the Silver Ravens, and many other newfound allies within the Firebrands. Andoran, Oh My Gordness. Although the nation of Andoran is renowned as a bastion of liberty, there is work for the Firebrands in that country as well. In Andoran, loggers often endure grueling work conditions, imposed by ruthless lumber companies. These companies invest heavily in training their foremen to prevent loggers from forming unions or collectives to demand better rights. Relief for the oppressed loggers has come from an unexpected source, from within the Verduran forest itself. A small gang of Gordleshies, led by Autumn Hollowhead, has come to the aid of these long-suffering workers. Autumn's animating spirit seems to have been deeply influenced by an ardent abolitionist, leading them to remember allies in Andoran and Taldor. The Leshies, who have taken the silly name Oh My Gordness, employed natural methods to disrupt work sites, damage equipments, hide runaway workers, and generally make life exceedingly difficult for the lumber companies, ultimately helping them fight for workers' rights in Andoran. Galt, Tremel's Network, the Unmaskers, the Shepherds of the Lost, Amber's Custodians, and many others. Firebrands have been actively involved in Galt since the year 4716, when a rebel group known as the Bladebreakers attempted to overthrow the Grey Gardeners. The Grey Gardeners were a brutal monastic order who seized control of the nation during the botched Red Revolution. While the initial claim that the Bladebreakers were actively working with foreign firebrands was untrue when they made it, it did inspire actual firebrand members to join the cause. Despite the suppression of the rebellion and the disbandment of the Bladebreakers, some firebrands managed to evade capture, continuing their seditious activities in Galt. Furthermore, despite the defeat of the Bladebreakers in 4721, the monastic headquarters of the Grey Gardeners was destroyed. Details about the individuals responsible for these events, their personal motivations, political affiliations, and true identities remain elusive, and vary widely depending on the storyteller. Many credit or blame foreign firebrands for the events in Litrin that led to the fall of the Grey Gardeners. Despite the shift in power, Galt remains unstable, and numerous firebrands persist in their effort to bring peace to the country. One surviving Bladebreaker leader, the halfling Handish Tremel, found refuge near the town of Dabril in northwestern Galt. Operating under the guise of an apiarist, Handish has spent several years cultivating a network of informants and couriers. His shipments of honey and candles often conceal coded messages, coordinating revolutionary activities. Handish also collaborates with druids from the northern Verduran forest to facilitate the smuggling of vulnerable Galtans out of the country into Andoran or Taldor. His operation is sometimes referred to as Tremel's Network. Another firebrand cell, called the Unmaskers, is dedicated to tracking down former Grey Gardeners and bringing them to justice. Their mission involves infiltration, intelligence gathering, and espionage. Although allegations of burglary, extortion, and kidnapping have been made against them, the Unmaskers often engage in heated debates regarding the appropriate treatment of former gardeners. Should they stand trial, face execution? What level of evidence is required to implicate one? The Unmaskers frequently receive assistance in their quest for incriminating records from the Shepherds of the Lost, another firebrand group in Galt. The Shepherds are committed to uncovering the fate of citizens who disappeared during the decades-long reign of terror. While many dissidents and political prisoners were once held in Gardner-run prisons, success stories have become increasingly rare. For every orphan reunited with their family in exile, dozens of Galtans remain documented only in records of their executions. Nevertheless, the Shepherds persist, emphasizing the need for a comprehensive account of the actions of the Gardeners and previous governments to achieve justice and reconciliation. In a somewhat unconventional move for a firebrand, Amber Morell, a former expatriate, has sought assistance from the Church of Abadar in her mission to return seized property to its rightful owners. Amber oversees a team of dedicated clerks who meticulously document claims related to missing heirlooms and long-abandoned estates. While she relishes the thrill of recovering stolen valuables, administrative duties largely confine her to her office in Isarn, leaving fieldwork to her hired agents. Amber's work has sparked controversy in Galt, as the passage of time has made it impossible to establish clear ownership of many recovered items. Disputes and counterclaims often lead to contentious conflicts. Additionally, many Galtans are skeptical of attempts by exiled nobles to reclaim their former lands, even though the results of the Red Revolution were largely disastrous, as the principles of egalitarianism continue to hold sway in the hearts of most Galtans. In the capital of Isarn, there are other firebrands tirelessly collaborating with the remaining members of the Revolutionary Council to advance stability and freedom in the nation. Camelia Dranik herself, the Revolutionary Council's leader, puts forth her best efforts to coordinate these diverse groups, even though she occasionally jests in private about her challenging role, likening it to herding roosters. Among the firebrands who provide practical assistance, those who extend aid receive the greatest recognition from the Galtan populace. For example, a religious faction who worship Yelaine, the Windweaver, goddess of clothing, security, and self-expression, has established itself in the capital, distributing warm clothing and nourishment to care for marginalized individuals often neglected during Galt's political upheavals. Meanwhile, Professor Thistle, a wandering firebrand scholar, has assembled a team of educators to establish freely accessible schools across the city. Additional firebrands can be found across the capital and beyond in small cohorts, engaged in activities such as reconstructing residences, providing vocational training, and imparting defensive strategies to the guards. Taldor, Stone's Bandits and the Upara Mediums. In Taldor, under the leadership of Grand Princess Eutropia, there have been many great strides made towards healing the scars of centuries of economic inequity. But naturally here the class struggle persists. Because of the long history of serfdom in the country and the rapidity with which change has been coming since the recent civil struggle, the Firebrands find plenty of work here, and Firebrands who gain prominence in Taldor often become famous across the Inner Sea. One such figure is Jack Stone, a charismatic leader of a group of rangers in the southern range of Taldor. They waylay wealthy travelers, seizing their riches and redistributing them to struggling farmers and smallholders. What few in her band know is that Jack Stone is actually Viscountess Jacinda Relari in disguise. She abandoned her noble life to help the impoverished when she grew disheartened with the regressive attitudes of her fellow nobility. Another Firebrand cell operating out of the capital are the Opara mediums. Communicating with the deceased or seeking ancestral wisdom is common among the Taldans, who greatly value the wisdom of their elders. Spiritualists are sought after for these tasks, and Knocking Jenny, a renowned dwarf medium and leader of the cell, is among the most sought after. Her ability to interact with spirits is widely respected, and she is known not only for her extraordinary abilities, but also for her eccentric fashion sense, particularly when performing a séance. Absalom, the Bladed Bastards, the Mithril Chef, the Pure Water Haven, and the Baffle Guild. Numerous Firebrand cells make the city at the center of the world their base of operations, but 4 significant ones have emerged as the most noteworthy. The first are the Bladed Bastards, headquartered at the Impalement Arts, a dagger-throwing shop in Absalom's boardwalk. Their emblem hangs like a warning over the shop's doors, crossed daggers over a target. The charismatic brothers Quar and Galamir are the leaders of the Bladed Bastards, and use the shop to assess potential Firebrand recruits in terms of dexterity, showmanship, and sense of humor. The Bastards are known for their daring public stunts and their skill with throwing daggers and knives. These audacious displays are often intended to outdo the nearby Firebrand's faction known as the Mithril Chef, with whom the Bladed Bastards have a friendly rivalry. The Mithril Chef is both an upscale restaurant located in Absalom's Docks district and a headquarters of a Firebrand cell of the same name. The restaurant's owner, Claudette Butterfoot, is famous for her impressive culinary skills and showmanship, skills she trains her elite staff to perform as well. Many of the stories shared at the restaurant recount the exploits of her team, whom Claudette generously grants leave to engage in noble Firebrand missions in and around Absalom. Her staff often conduct impromptu demonstrations and free tastings for the poor on the docks, timing their flamboyant displays to rival those of the Bladed Bastards. The apparent competition between the two Firebrand groups serves as a smokescreen for their actual clandestine missions, which include rescuing prisoners, thwarting criminal enterprises, and exposing plots against the Dockworkers' Union. In addition to these two, nestled in the heart of Absalom's Puddle district, the Pure Water Haven is not just an orphanage, but a Firebrand cell that goes by the same name. Their primary mission is to bring organization and cohesion to Firebrands operating independently throughout Absalom. Pure Water Haven plays a crucial role in keeping these lone operatives coordinated. At the helm of this operation is Hope, a friendly but blunt Aasimar priest devoted to Nocticula. Hope firmly believes in second chances, having personally seized an opportunity to leave her life of street crime behind. Finally, a fourth group calls itself the Baffle Guild, and their HQ is unknown. In fact, it remains unclear whether the Baffle Guild is a genuine Firebrand cell or an elaborate prank aimed at Absalom's intellectual elite. They discreetly scatter intricately designed puzzles throughout the city, each marked with a symbol of crossed keys over a blindfolded face. These puzzles all lead to a clue about a mysterious event scheduled to take place in Absalom's Ivy district. Aside from possibly serving as a convoluted recruitment method, some have observed that the buzz in town surrounding the puzzles is drawing wealthy residents out of their homes and into the streets as they search for hidden clues, which has made them easy targets for pickpockets and thieves. Until the Ivy District event actually occurs, it's uncertain whether the Baffle Guild are, as they claim, a secret society of liberators, or just a bunch of con artists taking advantage of the good reputation of the Firebrands across the Inner Sea. Kadira, the Next Peerless, and the Sundered Seal. Kadira serves the gateway to the expansive continent of Kazmarin to the east, and the sprawling empire of Kalesh, drawing adventurous Firebrand explorers far from their homeland. One Firebrand cell here is known as the Next Peerless, and they also happen to be counted among the ranks of Satrap Zerbisti's most esteemed groups of heroes. As one member is preparing for retirement, the Satrap is on the verge of nominating a new addition to this illustrious group, attracting daredevils and fellow Firebrands from across the vast Padishah Empire and beyond to converge on Kathir. Another cell in the vicinity of the port city of Sedek is known as the Sundered Seal, and toils relentlessly to dismantle the nefarious genie-binding trade. Their charismatic leader Kalshar, a Suli abolitionist, orchestrates daring nocturnal forays into the city. Their mission: assassinate known genie binders and liberate their captive charges. Authorities in Sadek have implored Satrap Zerbistes to aid in the capture of the elusive Sundered Seal, but the ruler has thus far rebuffed them. Meanwhile, the daring raids persist, and Kalshar seeks to forge alliances with seafaring firebrands to intercept ships transporting genie captives through the bustling port. Geb, the following of Erasni. Geb is one kingdom where the firebrands have made little to no headway. The frightening domain of the Bloodlords and their ghost king remains even more difficult a nation to penetrate than infernal Cheliax. However, it too is not without its revolutionaries. Prior to the return of the Whispering Tyrant in the Gravelands, the nation was overseen not by the Ghost King himself, but by his chosen surrogate, the Lich Queen Erasni. A small following of Erasni devotees continue to work in secret in Geb, doing favors for the Quick Dead Coalition and other less formally recognized members of rebel groups in the hopes of attracting more firebrand attention to Geb. Next, the Burrows Agency and Shelton Spectacular. Quantium, the bustling capital city, stands as a nexus for travelers from distant planes who venture into the realm of Galarian. Many visitors from beyond the material plane choose to conduct business within the city's borders. When these business dealings turn sour, local merchants find themselves with limited recourse if their erstwhile partners escape into otherworldly dimensions. This is where the Burrows Agency, under the guise of Perte Burrows, a fetchling sleuth, shines. Perte prides himself on an impeccable track record in resolving cases of interdimensional embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Burrows' agents will relentlessly pursue a suspect, tracking them from the fringes of the abyss to the heights of heaven. The Shelton Spectacular is a traveling circus, also composed of Nexian firebrands, that regularly traverses the cities of Iconis, Enopian, and even Alkenstar City. Despite the jaded disposition of the people of Nex, who are accustomed to witnessing magical marvels on the regular, consummate entertainer and orc ringmaster Shelton Zanspark has made it the Spectacular's mission to thrill the nation's masses. Shelton proudly declares that their organization boasts the largest rotating cast of performers on Galarian. With such a diverse array of acts, spectators seldom witness the same performance twice. Katapesh, the Badawi Pesh Growers Guild. Katapesh, a nation with a troubled history regarding slavery, has been under the rule of the merciless Pact Masters ever since it declared independence from the Kelishite Empire in 3250. These inhuman Pact Masters formed a governing council that concealed its autocratic control behind a facade of capitalism, open borders, and free markets. They employ golem-like constructs called alums to maintain order and enforce their laws, a topic I delve into more extensively in my Constructs Creature feature. Managing the day-to-day affairs of the government on behalf of the Pact Masters is Pact broker Hashim ibn Said. In Katapesh, everything, including people, was up for sale. Nevertheless, in recent decades, a significant number of enslaved individuals managed to escape the clutches of the Pact Masters by fleeing into the remote regions of Katapesh. Beyond the bustling bazaars, they found shelter, anonymity, and employment among the Badawi villagers and nomads surviving in the Katapeshi deserts. The Pact Masters had historically taken a lax approach to governing these hinterlands, leaving them largely unaware that liberated residents were collaborating with rural Badawi villagers on a plan to disrupt the Pesh trade, a vital component of their trade empire. Their strategy involved marketing their own Pesh paste as a natural stimulant that could help combat the devastating effects of refined Pesh addiction. With the profits from paste sales, they aimed to expand their Pesh cultivation sites and assist more enslaved Katapeshi in escaping to rural villages. The plan met with immediate success, but the introduction of this alternative form of Pesh into the market attracted the attention of the Pact Masters. Several weeks after the Badawi Pesh growers introduced their new drug, the Pact Masters dispatched bands of mercenaries into Badawi territories to seize their Pesh crops. However, in a surprise turn of events, the Badawi villagers and their newly freed allies emerged victorious in the initial skirmishes. They promptly declared themselves a cell of the Firebrands, and sent messages to other Firebrand groups seeking assistance and setting the stage for an unexpected revolution. Fearing a disastrous and bloody uprising, the Badawi revolution was abruptly halted when the Pact Masters agreed to key terms. This marked the end of slavery in the nation, with a tacit agreement allowing the Badawi Growers Guild to continue selling their new Pesh in the common markets. While the Pact Masters typically prefer to exert influence from the shadows, recent events have compelled them to take a more direct role. The sudden emergence of Pesh paste, followed by the Badawi revolt, left them struggling for control for the first time in centuries. To external observers, it appears that the Pact Masters have become complacent and vulnerable. In fact, despite pact broker Hashim ibn Said's reassurances to Katapesh's various guild masters that the pact masters have the situation under control, some cunning guild masters are beginning to advocate for a coup. If it seems that the pact masters are likely to lose to the Firebrands, these guild masters plan to withdraw their soldiers from the pact masters' forces, withhold tax revenue, and even employ tactics such as imprisonment, bribery, and coercion to sever ties between pesh dealers and the pact masters. This would plunge Katapesh into immediate chaos, with pact masters forced to battle guildmaster forces in the crowded streets and bustling stalls at the heart of the nation. So the pact masters have held some strategies in reserve. They have been cultivating a deeper relationship with Katapesh's Knoll community. This included the establishment of the first ever Knoll battalion of the Zephyr Guard. With this sudden influx of military strength, they believe the Zephyr Guard should be able to subdue the dissenting guildmasters. Osirian, the Dawn's Edge, the Riddle Chasers, and the Mockingbird. Despite being another nation with a history of slavery, it's not the quest for liberty that tends to bring out the Firebrands in Osirian, but that other aspect in their nature, the thrill-seeking and adventurous side. For example, the Dawn's Edge Firebrand cell operates in defiance of Ruby Prince Kemet III's decree outlawing explorations of certain ruins and tombs. Their mission takes them across the land, where they cleanse ancient sites infested with undead, divs, and other perilous inhabitants. Collaborating closely with the Church of Sarenrae, these Firebrands swiftly respond to distress calls from communities scattered throughout Osirian. Although their group's leader, Beslet Namescribe, a Pamet dwarf, is officially a wanted criminal, the authorities often tolerate Dawn's Edge, especially in the country's remote regions. The Riddle Chasers are another example. Osirian has long attracted individuals with a passion for esoteric knowledge. These researchers delve into ancient pyramids, documenting its ageless monuments and questioning its inscrutable sphinxes. While conventional universities caution against delving into forbidden knowledge concerning subjects like the Dominion of the Black or the Great Old Ones, there are countless intrepid truth-seekers willing to risk everything to solve the nation's mysteries. Each year, on the 11th of Neth, Jiria the Cryptic, a Maftet occultist, hosts a gathering for the Riddle Chasers at her tavern on the southern outskirts of Sothis. Members share their discoveries and seek collaborators with complementary expertise. At the end of the gathering, Jiria bestows the title of Riddle Master upon the researcher with the most captivating find, granting them prestige and complimentary drinks at her establishment until the next gathering. Osirian was also the meeting place of two renowned Garundi thieves, who met while attempting to steal the same object, the ruby sistrum of Setankari III. Their playful clash became a recurring love affair, and the duo soon married. Now they share the same mantle of the master thief Mockingbird, enjoying the confusion their capers cause. The Mockingbird remains a famed and independent member of the Firebrands faction. Rahadum, the Red Roosters and the Vibrant Wave. In Rahadum, the Pure Legion enforces strict laws of mortality, punishing preachers who violate the ban on proselytizing with imprisonment, exile, or execution. In the city of Maniket, a renowned debate club known as the Rooster's Perch found itself entangled in a heated discussion about the morality of these punishments. While the club officially supported the state stance, a faction of dissident philosophers led by the elderly Borzel Nikanwan felt ethically compelled to defy the Pure Legion and free these imprisoned preachers. Borzel has since declared his allegiance to the Firebrands, and his followers formed a secret cell known as the Red Roosters. Despite his well-reasoned criticisms of Firebrand activities across the Inner Sea region, and his belief that there are many ethical inconsistencies within the organization, Borzel is a passionate and valued member of the Firebrands faction, and he actively orchestrates prison breakouts and develops plans for religious exiles' discreet returns to their homes or safe resettlements. Borzel continues to lecture in Maniket, and publishes numerous philosophical tracts with identical covers, a pair of crossed quills, over a silhouette deep in thought. While he hasn't technically engaged in the proscribed faith-based activities that would subject him to the Pure Legion's jurisdiction, Borzel knowingly but carefully challenges the authorities in his country. Another small Firebrand faction originally hailing from Rahadum are the crew of the three-masted frigate the Vibrant Wave. The Wave are notable because their Undine captain Jessima Disvaloris befriended the ancient dragon Carthaval, with whom the crew spent 3 nights sharing drinks and stories before he finally decided to become a permanent member of the crew. The dragon, who had spent the majority of his earlier centuries getting to know the people of Maniket in northern Rahadum, found maintaining a social life difficult in the long years of his life, resigning himself to his lair on Bikorano Island for weeks at a time, until he soon lost touch with most of his friends at the Ocularium, Maniket's prestigious magical college. Carthaval found a new lease on life with the Firebrands of the Vibrant Wave. He now spends most of his days flying beside the vibrant wave, or perching on its mast to rest. When not with the crew, Carthaville visits other Firebrand cells, sharing information and gossip, amassing an unofficial network that other Firebrands sometimes call the Dragon's Voice. In the Soddenlands, the Turwa Lords, Iruxi conquerors, have been steadily expanding their dominion. While some Iruxis regard them as righteous, albeit zealous rulers, who could potentially forge an Iruxi empire, most Turwa Lords harbor ambitions of dominance rather than unification. Iruxi firebrands in the Mwangi Expanse often emerge from witnessing the peaceful villages and wandering tribes crushed beneath the scaled feet of the Turwa Lords to fuel their unquenchable thirst for conquest. Groups like the Six-Star Redeemers, an all-Iruxi faction of firebrands led by Hakasha, a female lizardfolk astrologer, tirelessly endeavor to convince their kin that the Turwa Lords obstruct Iruxi freedom more so than they elevate Iruxi honor. However, their uphill battle is particularly challenging among the many Iruxis in the Soddenlands, who now view the Turwa Lords as heroic figures. The Greater Mwangi Expanse. Although their numbers may be relatively small, their impact is considerable. In the cosmopolitan city of Kibwe, a recent decree has outlawed slavery. The once enthusiastic Bekyar people who had been actively involved in the slave trade have now transitioned to employing hired laborers, but many of these overseers were former traffickers, and they employ familiar tactics. Local firebrands discreetly provide laborers with much-needed sustenance and quality tools to help them meet demanding production quotas. Meanwhile, the activity around Lake Okota has surged following the defeat of the guerrilla king in Usaro. This perilous body of water teems with massive predators, yet adventurous visitors willingly brave their dangers while searching for sunken treasure. Among these intrepid divers are numerous firebrand enthusiasts. Despite the risks, many emerge from the depths with waterlogged riches, masking the large number of those who never resurface. A group of firebrands known as the Death Divers have achieved remarkable success here. They share their spoils with the downtrodden residents of ramshackle towns that line the lake's coasts. Mizali, the Bright Lions. The Bright Lions are a revolutionary group dedicated to overthrowing the rule of Walkenna, a tyrannical god-king who rules the city-state of Mizali. Operating from the abandoned districts and safe houses within their ancient temple city, the Lions have waged a cloak-and-dagger war of attrition against the Child God's regime under the leadership of Sihar, a former mercenary who holds the teachings of the old sun gods close to heart. More information can be found on the Bright Lions in my Southern Mwangi Expanse deep dive video. The Isles of the Shackles, the Nightwave. There's another pivotal figure in the Vidric victory over the Shackles pirates that I haven't mentioned yet. Devrin Arlos, the captain of the Nightwave. At one time he was a free captain, and a member of the Free Captains' Council in the Shackles. Devrin's path crossed with the Mannix sisters, Shimali and Volmia, in the years leading up to the Vidric Revolution. He played a critical role by changing sides during the significant naval battle in Desperation Bay. However, Devrin's motivations for joining the Firebrands were far from altruistic. He was always motivated by challenge, profit, or both, and his betrayal was primarily a matter of self-interest, as the Mannix sisters offered him a substantial sum for his timely switch. In fact, Devrin's actions prior to the revolution were filled with dubious dealings. According to Volmia's account, Devrin had a prior marriage to a woman named Lanissa, who ultimately betrayed him, sacrificing him in her quest to become a pirate lich. It's said that as Devrin sank into the depths of the Fever Sea, Asmodeus, the Prince of Darkness, extended an offer of vengeance. With a pact sealed, the jet-black ship known as the Nightwave emerged from the depths, bearing Devrin back to the surface. However, Devrin is renowned for spinning tall tales, so the veracity of this story remains uncertain. Nonetheless, he has continued to serve the Firebrand's interests, and he has managed to maintain his unlikely role as a force for good in the years since. Devrin's devoted crew includes his navigator, Volmia Mannix, the fraternal twin of the renowned Firebrand leader Shimali Mannix. Since her youth, Volmia had always sought out challenges that seemed too monumental for any single individual to face alone. The wind, the waves, and the monsters of the deep. While helping to establish the Sargavan government was once on her list of challenges, she has since returned to her first love, sailing into the uncharted waters of the great unknown. Among the ship's other seasoned crewmates is Giant Annet, a halfling who serves Devrin as his first mate. She's known for her sharp tongue and intolerance of fools, swiftly dissuading any newcomers who believe life aboard the Nightwave consists solely of revelry and merrymaking. During skirmishes, Giant may take the helm, and possesses an uncanny knowledge for navigating the ship away from perilous situations by a hair's breadth. Then there's Garm Mountain Man Danthor, a dwarf marksman who has earned a reputation as an expert sniper. The rest of the crew often tease Garm for his love of the sea, despite his mountain man origins, but they are equally quick to praise his incredible musket skills. When the crew needs to hasten past danger, they let Garm take a few shots, as even a handful of Garm's well-placed shots can make a foe reconsider engagement. One of the most recent additions is Reese, an Undine wave singer who possesses the extraordinary ability to control water and sea creatures through her music, and she acts as a valuable contact between the Firebrands and the underwater communities. Reese alternates between life aboard the ship and existence beneath the ocean's surface, assisting deep-sea civilizations. While living among the crew, Reese keeps spirits high with the enchanting melodies she plays on her magical lyre, crafted from shell, narwhal horn, and mother of pearl. Another, less consistent but occasional crew member of the Nightwave is Ikani Truthspinner. Ikani Truthspinner is a mysterious and talented storyteller, a kitsune of unknown origin. While there are various speculations about her birthplace, her human appearance suggests a connection to the Eritaki or Varki cultures. She joined the Firebrands early on, finding her purpose and becoming renowned for her storytelling abilities. Despite her daring deeds in the name of truth and justice, Ikani is more famous for her stories. Her thrilling narratives of current events gain widespread acclaim, and many Firebrands seek her attention to have their heroics witnessed by her. Annually, at the Vaunters Carnival, she hosts a renowned competition open to Firebrands and anyone willing to test their bravery. Participants face a series of increasingly difficult dares and challenges, all devised and judged by the Truthspinner herself. Finally, another figure seen aboard the Nightwave is Ishi Bunji, the so-called tyrant breaker of Minkai. Bunji, a former sumo champion, had always possessed an unwavering passion for combat and physical prowess. However, a significant shift occurred in his perspective after he lent his support to an uprising against the Jade Regent within his native province. Witnessing the widespread suffering that enveloped his surroundings during the subsequent year of post-uprising reconstruction prompted a profound question to take root within him. What purpose did strength serve if not to safeguard the vulnerable? This contemplation became a guiding principle in Bunji's life, leading him on a journey that eventually brought him to the Firebrands. His wealth of combat experience and innate tactical acumen have since become invaluable assets within the ranks of the Firebrands.